Harry and Meghan's master plan to censor the media so extremely that it once again backfired, blew up in their faces. Horrible idea. Typical. Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Their frustration with negative public opinion and negative press in their eyes has been unfair and called for drastic actions this time. They decided to censor their Colombia trip to such an extreme extent. Many people have drawn comparisons to the likes of dictators. Not a good look. Rumors are now swirling that this was the actual reason why Mr. Kettler quit right before this trip. He was not open to the idea of this total censorship situation, which proves his intelligence, by the way, because Harry and Meghan seem to be the only ones on the planet who think that their media coverage is unfair. And no matter who you are, no matter how unfair media coverage may or may not have been, and no matter your personal feelings on the matter, censoring the press in this manner is a bad look from so many angles. But before we get into that, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and click the like button and leave a comment below. It really helps me out, and I always love hearing from you guys. If you don't know what to comment, just leave a yellow heart. So part of the Sussexes problem, as we know and we have discussed forever now, is that they cannot read the room. Either they're unable or unwilling to read the room. They do not understand the public perception, the temperature. They do not understand the importance of the public opinion of themselves, nor do they seem to get how media actually works. But they firmly believe, especially Harry, it would seem, that everything from the press to the public voting them the most disliked public figures 2 years in a row now is completely unfair. It's just not fair, Harold says. So their solution to these woes is control. Try to control it. Try to control it even more and force positive press to happen. Just force it. Well, that doesn't work for anybody. It never has. It never will. In the history of press relations, it has never worked to try to force public opinion, to force positive press coverage. It's just like in wrestling. If they try to force somebody down the fan's throat, they end up rejecting that wrestler completely because they don't want to be told who to like. Same thing goes in public arenas. The public doesn't want to be told who to like at all. And Harry and Meghan have repeatedly taken the approach of trying to tell people to like them. It's never going to work. So Harry and Meghan censored this trip. Many of the pictures issued came from their own press person, so they own the pictures that they're releasing, and they're releasing only the positive ones. Ones where they're smiling or thrusting their bodies at strangers for hugs. Here's the problem with that. It is censorship, and that treads right alongside with misinformation. If you're withholding truth, then you are doing the same thing as spreading mistruth. You are not letting the public make up their own minds. You are telling them that only this version of events is to be believed or seen or held as truth or reported on. When in reality, there's a much bigger picture, and there's a lot more happening, and there's a lot more sides to the story, and there was a lot more pictures from that trip that the public was not allowed to see, and that the Sussexes held back and hid away. They didn't want people to see that there weren't crowds there to see them. The auditoriums were like a third of the way or a fourth of the way full. They didn't want people to see that there weren't people lined up to see them and greet them the way they do for the actual royals. They didn't want people to see the excessive amounts of security, the tanks, the police, the shields held up behind them at the schools. They wanted you to just see little narrow bits. Hiding the truth is misinformation because you are changing the actual truth by trimming away elements of it. That is not okay. And it's especially upsetting to the public because Harry and Meghan try to talk like they're against misinformation while simultaneously spreading it. Harry especially talks a lot about misinformation, but then he is taking away and inhibiting the free press and the actual truth. He is hiding truths from the public actively, which is the exact same problem as outwardly telling lies. All he wants to do is control the media narrative, and he is attempting to do so by manufacturing an exclusively smiling picture board of their Colombia trip. It is crazy. But it also comes back around to undermine them once again. What are they hiding? That's what everybody wants to know. What do you have to hide? What is so bad that you can't just let the press come and take pictures? What's going on? What is it that you don't want people to see or know about this trip or just you in general? What's going on? Is it because you're going to be scowling or glaring at people or unhappy? Or is it something else? Like, what is it that you're hiding? This approach led people to these questions. Ideally, from a public image perspective, press relations, you don't want people asking, what are you hiding? You want to be giving access normally so that people see there's nothing being hidden, ideally. Harper's Bazaar was the only publication allowed access to the events. Now, why do that? They claimed that it was to ensure the trip was depicted accurately, but that's not up to them. Hate to break it to you, Harold and the Meg, but it's not up to you to decide whether or not it's depicted accurately when it comes to actual journalists and the press. They are there to report the facts and what actually happened. They play a role in history being recorded. Just because the Sussexes don't like a journalist's take or opinion or angle on an event doesn't mean that it's inaccurate. And like most things they do, it has backfired. Because the real journalists and publications that are serious and respectable were not given access, like, for example, BBC, Daily Mail, CNN, all of these normal publications were not given access. Therefore, they could not independently verify or observe these things, and thus they did not necessarily trust the Sussex PR release or this Harper's Bazaar reporter who was relatively inexperienced and was giving a lot of weird, unnecessary, fluffy details, not hard facts. And because they had an exclusive deal with the Sussexes for the trip, that meant there's monetary gain, which means possible bias, and therefore was not a reliable source. A source that is commissioned or paid for by the subject automatically makes it not a reliable source. And because well-respected news sites could not verify any of the facts, they simply didn't report on it. So they ended up with less coverage. On the back foot, they had to play catch-up after the trip, and the criticism started to get more and more unanimous and serious. They were left doing damage control, like issuing statements to try to defend themselves, but it was too little too late, leaving the impression that the donations were sent post-criticism, and the trip-paid-for answers were vague, unclear, and inadequate. Needless to say, it would have been easy for them to take a much more effective press strategy, of which many of us could whip up in less than 5 minutes. But more importantly, it led them and us all right back to where we started. Public figures, such as royals, or those pretending to be faux royals, like the Sussexes, actually depend quite heavily on the media. Harry and Meghan got sour that the press coverage wasn't 100% positive all of the time. They've now attempted to accomplish a completely filtered media presence under the guise that they want to make sure it's accurately depicted. Facts are facts, not feelings. And in their aim to accomplish this, they blocked a great deal of their publicity altogether and made themselves look like dictator types who want to censor things. And it's not necessarily about just censorship in general. It's about, why can't you just let the press come and take pictures of your events? What's going on? It's fishy. It's very, very fishy. And even without that, it's only accentuated the pointlessness of the trip. It revealed it to be just a PR exercise to get these contrived pictures to use for their Archewell website, a photo shoot. This approach led them further down the path of obscurity. It simultaneously highlighted the very different approach that the royal family have and a key flaw to Harry and Meghan's beef with the media in general. The royal family has a relationship with the press that's relatively balanced. One in which they maintain boundaries with the press and there is an established mutual respect. The royals know and understand that the press needs to be involved and invited on their official duties and informed of important things, and also accepts that there's a great deal of public interest in them. And so they make concessions like publishing family photos and milestones. On the other hand, the press is very cautious of their royal family's private lives. They do not follow around the children for pictures or stalk the school. They don't interfere in off-duty times. This arrangement is good. It allows the public fair access to these public figures, and it allows the royals a greater degree of privacy and autonomy. It does come with the knowledge that there will not always be wholly positive stories. There will be criticism, there will sometimes be false stories, sometimes something goes wrong, and that will be reported on because that is the news. But the royal family are clearly skilled at not letting that bother them too awful much, and fortunately, they're usually not making mistakes or caught out in a bad moment. The royals have demonstrated it is possible to get almost exclusively positive press, maintain privacy and boundaries, and still let the press have normal access to your public-facing work. And it's not through lawsuits and aggressive censorship. It's through being good, likable, and non-controversial. Harry and Meghan, one thing they haven't tried yet is being non-controversial. They have not tried not being antagonistic and unwise in their choices and behaviors. For example, traveling to countries that are arguably less safe than the UK while simultaneously complaining about their safety in the UK, that is a bad look. It will always be seen as hypocritical. It will always be criticized. You want to travel to these countries? Drop the security beef. You're being called hypocritical because that is literally by definition what that is. You want to travel to countries with high rates of poverty and economic challenges? Pay your own way. Put out a quiet press release before the trip that acknowledges that this comes at no expense to said country. Then you won't have questions about your ethics. Want to travel to countries for no true purpose and have pictures taken modeled after the real royals, pretending to be royals? Well, that one's harder to save and make palatable to the public, but not complaining endlessly about your time having done such work with the royal family sure would have helped that not look so bad and hypocritical and weird. Needless to say, their press strategy seems very rooted in control, like that is just their one and only path. The thing is you shouldn't need to control the press or your public image if you're not doing things wrong, if you're not being shady, if you're not doing questionable stuff, if you're not controversial. You shouldn't have any need to control the press. Remember the key word here, free press means ideally not controlled. Also, the Sussexes are very image driven, which is ironic after in Netflix they said it's always about how it will look, as if that's a bad thing. The fact is it's neither good or bad. It just is. An image is worth 1,000 words. Many people just read a headline and look at the picture. Public people do have to pay attention to how things look. And for Harry and Meghan, that seems a real fixation and one that they're sort of spitefully caught in. They're forcing this hugger image, for example. They tried to force a victim image before that. They've tried to push a philanthropist, humanitarian, Diana-esque image. It's not working because it's staged and it's not genuine. It appears as though Harry is the one very controlling about the media and he lashes out at bad press. It enrages him as if to say, how dare people not approve of us or me or Meghan or what we're doing. This petulance he has always been known for, while Meghan is the one who's very image focused, trying to constantly push certain narratives, like the hand-holding, the hugging, the walking first, all coming from her side of it. When a bad article comes out about her, she's more likely to try to counter it, even with lies. Case in point, the hugging. She has been seen as mean, cold, calculating, difficult, even a bully, and she thinks that a hugger image will counter that. While Harry's more likely to lash out in a press release or a lawsuit. Ultimately, Harry and Meghan will never win their battle against the media if this is how they're fighting it. You cannot fight against something that people pretty much universally believe is the right way to go about the media, which is to not control and censor them like a dictator. Censoring the media, controlling what can and cannot be said or published about you, it's just not gonna fly in places that have had free press since 1695 in the UK and 1791 in the US. It's not gonna happen. If they want positive coverage so badly, then they need to change their actions, their words, and their patronizing tones. Hearing the Meg speak does not endear her to anyone. She's stuck in the most patronizing tone of voice and speech pattern I have heard in a long time. Not even politicians use these tones and this cadence that she does anymore because it's very unlikable. Like statistically, they've done focus groups on it, and when you speak in this sort of a pattern and cadence that the Meg does, people don't like it. if they tried less hard to force themselves to be liked. Let the press come round and report what they find. Nothing to hide. If you're not being shady, if you're not unlikable and fake, the press won't have bad things to say. Simple. So all this comes down to the same question everyone everywhere is now asking. What are they so afraid of? What are they hiding? You know some of the answers. In Colombia and Nigeria, they were hiding at the very least a lack of interest, a lack of crowds. They do not draw the public to them the way the royal families do, and so that must be hidden. Showing up late to almost every event is rude no matter who you are. That must be hidden. But what more are they hiding? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And now it's time for question of the day. Elisa asked, what is going on with this situation in which Harry had his hand on the back of this lady's chair? When I looked at this picture, the first thing that I noticed is how upright this lady is sitting. Like, her posture is great, but she's clearly stiff, like very stiffened. I totally get. I've had this happen before. You don't feel like you can relax. You don't want to lean back and have your back touch this person's hand or something. And if you sat back, it would look like you're snuggling up with them, which would be super awkward. You feel like you can't move. So I feel bad for her. But also, it's a serious PR fail. You just can't do stuff like that because look at what a stir it's caused. And it is impolite to Meg, and maybe that's why he did it. But also, he's invading someone else's space. It's a social fail. It's a bad look. But what did you think? Leave it in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a happy day ahead. I'll see you next time. Bye.